Alrighty, here's another story behind the story. When I first graduated from college, I ended up working for a CBS affiliate in Augusta, Georgia, which is actually North Augusta, South Carolina. I'm taking you to 1996, and this is when the Olympic Games were right here in Atlanta. But yet and still, I was living and working in Augusta. I had a really close connection and friendship with the late, great James Brown, godfather of soul. He used to just come by our station just whenever he felt like it. This particular time that he came, this was shortly after his wife, Adrienne, had died. Adrienne was his longtime wife, makeup artist, and he had not done any interviews about her death. For whatever reason, he came by the station that day. He also used to bring his daughter, Deanna Brown Thomas. What's up, girl? What's up, my Sarah? He used to bring her by as well because she had a interest in media, television broadcasting. We always welcomed him into our station. That particular day, I had just finished anchoring, I think, the noon show, and I was just talking to him, kind of feeling him out, seeing how he felt. Before you knew it, I had brought him over to our set. We sat down and we actually had an in-depth conversation about his wife, Adrienne, dying. And that was the first interview that he had done anywhere, locally or nationally, in regards to the death of his wife. After that interview, I made mention to him, Mr. Brown, you know, I sing. I mentioned that because every year he would have a birthday bash. Right around his birthday was a concert to celebrate him, and he would have acts that would come. Sharon Stone has come, Slash has come, a number of people have come to celebrate Mr. Brown. So he was like, well, let me hear you sing something. I sang something for him, and he was like, I want you to be one of the opening acts, my birthday bash. And I was like, oh my God. And so he was like, I want you to come by the Civic Center. I want you to rehearse with my background vocalist called Bittersweet at the time. Bittersweet forever. And he said, pick a song. And I was like, okay. Speed up to the time that, and did I mention that the interview with him and his wife ended up being a 2-part series that we aired on the CBS affiliate? Yeah, just want to say that real quick. Anyway, so graduated up to time to rehearse. I go by the Civic Center. The band is there. The background vocalists are there. I'm practicing my song. He did not like how the drummer was playing the drums. He asked the drummer to get off the drums. He got on the drums. The late, great James Brown, godfather of soul, Mr. Please, got on the drums and played for me. Keeping in mind, this was not the time that cell phones were all the rage, so I don't have any pictures of that, and I regret that to this day. I was giddy the entire night. It was magical. So, cut to, we knew that James Brown was going to be performing at the House of Blues during the Atlanta Olympics. So, I wanted to go to the Olympics, but I didn't want to work. So, I acted as a producer. I facilitated the interview between another anchor who would interview Mr. Brown. I could have a good time on the side stage with my girl Deanna, her sister Yama. So it was me, Yama, Deanna on the side stage. And when I tell you, we had a ball, okay? Like, we danced, sang till we wet. We had a great time. And the House of Blues was packed. It's time for us to pack up and leave. But for whatever reason, the reporter who came with us started acting strangely to the point where she started speaking of hurting herself or having some type of suicide ideologies. And so when the bombing happened, we heard about it. The photographer who was there, the reporter, and myself. But the reporter was not in her, she just seemed off. So the photographer and I talked about covering the story. Like, I would jump back into my reporter anchor role and cover the story and just put this other reporter who was acting oddly back into the news van and, you know, lock the door, and we would go cover the story. But she was acting so erratically and unlike herself. I felt concerned about leaving her alone in the car while we covered the story and come back and she might not be there. And even though I was early on in my career, I had the presence of mind to go with my gut and my intuition. And even though I knew I probably was really going to get into trouble for it, the photographer and I made a joint decision to leave Atlanta to get this particular reporter back to Augusta. And I'm glad we made the decision, because even when we were driving back to Augusta on I-20, this particular reporter was sitting in the front seat. I was in the back seat. The photographer was driving. This reporter was opening the door, acting like she wanted to literally jump out of the vehicle while we were going 60, 65 miles down I-20. So we did not cover the Olympic Park bombing, even though we were there. But because this other situation was so strange and I was just really concerned, we came back home. And as expected, when we came back, the news director pulled me into the office, wanted to know why we did not cover one of the biggest stories in history. And because I did not want to get this particular reporter in trouble, as well as not feeling like it was my responsibility to share that story or whatever was happening with her, I just didn't want to do it. So rather than snitch, I basically told the news director that the news director needed to speak to that reporter. All I could say is we needed to come back home. And I think the news director knew me well enough to know, like, I wouldn't have said anything like that if it was not a really good reason. And to this day, I do not regret not one of the decisions I made, because up until that time and up until the bombing, baby, when I tell you again, Deanna, Yama, and I and Mr. Brown on that stage, Bittersweet doing that thing, we had a ball. So that is the story behind the story.